kick this off. Again, thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to be talking to Florida, but also looks like a whole bunch of other folks have checked in, so that's really awesome. So without any further ado, let's kick this off. So, yeah, Tom, you already did a good job kind of just uh, giving out our info, so I appreciate that. Austin, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so hi everyone, Austin Cush. I wanted to set the scene a little bit for this presentation. So when we started this planning for this, me and Andy had worked together in the College of Engineering at OSU for about 5 years. We ran a studio together, and we were pretty much, glued at the hip during our time working on instructional design together. So this presentation kind of comes from the perspective of like our time over 5 years creating digital media in a higher ed institution and kind of what we got out of it. So for context though, I don't have a background in education. My primary background is in communications analysis and research. So I kind of bring a different perspective on the why than I think a lot of people who are traditionally educated in e-learning and multimedia design. Um, but yeah, I love doing ID work. I love making movies. I love making videos. It's probably my biggest passion. But yeah, Andy, was there anything else that in your intro that you wanted to go over?
Oh, I think that's awesome. That's good. I think we can, jump right into it. All right. So just kind of quick check in, and this is kind of like how we like to run the show here. We'll kind of pause for a little bit to ask a question, but that also gives us a chance to check the chat to see what you all are kind of thinking and everything. So right now we're just kind of, quick pulse check, how do you think media elements can strengthen the bond between teachers and students? So I see a lot of instructional designers on the chat, but I also saw some developer roles and other folks. So, just real quick, give it like, I'll give you 15 seconds.
Andy Christie Lee said, congrats on the ABD. Same here. Doctoral purgatory.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. Maybe in the hangout, I can talk more about it.
I'm sure Andy's got tons of fun things about
Yeah.
that.
Right. So we're seeing ad engagement, personalized videos, engagement,
Humanized interaction. Love to see that.
reference queue, course interaction. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. Jumping
Give me
right into it.
give me one moment real quick. I just got to let my cat out.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll come for you. So this is going to be Austin's section, but what we're kind of getting into is looking at what does our efficient e-learning content mean and how can we have multiple goals at once. So obviously this has become a more of a, I would say, prevalent issue with emerging tech, maybe something called AI. I don't know. But what do you think, Austin?
Yeah, so I think efficiency can mean a lot of things. Efficiency is what you define it as. So efficient can mean it moves fast. Efficient can mean, it's extremely productive. But for our context, I always use efficiency in this conversation as saying it's achieving multiple goals. Um, you know, and that first goal always being that it translates the educational message without compromising it, right? So we always want to make sure in the process of this that regardless of how we want something to look, we're always making sure the learners are getting that core element that they need. And then, that kind of media component second that achieves that visual element, but also from my perspective, the communications element that helps create that bond between faculty member and student. And I think the efficient way to do that is through the use of digital media because we can create those bonds and we can create the transference of knowledge. All right. So you'll find out in this presentation, I'm a big communications nerd. I was a researcher. I love applying my theory to really anything I can. And these are the theoretical frameworks that I've used over the years when asked, well, why is this, digital media element better? Or why is it more efficient? Because there's multiple times throughout our career where we've had to, even in the studio, kind of explain and defend why we make these media pieces. So I'll just go over these really briefly. This isn't a presentation about theory, but social penetration theory. So if you've ever watched the movie Shrek, and Shrek says ogres are like onions and they have layers, that's a direct reference to Taylor and Altman's social penetration theory. As people, we have layers, and we naturally want to learn more and peel back layers about someone, and that helps us form a better relationship with them. In the context of media, um, when we see someone on a video, we hear the sound of their voice, we get a personal anecdote. That's a layer peeled away, and that creates that relationship. Social exchange theory, that's the I give you something, you give me something. By being present visually and auditorially, we feel like there's been an exchange of social currency, so we feel like we have a greater bond with the faculty member. Uncertainty reduction theory. I can remember every time I had a new course in college, before I'd even step in the room, my first thoughts were, what are they like? What do they look like? What do they sound like? Are they nice? Are they mean? We naturally have almost a need to figure out more about someone. And if that need isn't met, if all I get from you is a lot of readings assigned and I still don't know anything about you, I'm not going to ask you for help. I'm not going to form a bond past, just sending you a message. I'm not going to come to your office hours because I don't know anything about you. So, uncertainty reduction theory is kind of a new theory that I've started applying to this, but I think it resonates a lot with. I've had a lot of faculty members come to me saying that, well, they never come and ask for help. Well, do they feel comfortable coming and asking for help? Because do they know you? But yeah, that's kind of my theory portion of it. And if you have questions about that, we can talk about those at the next check-in. Andy?
All right. So I know Austin said this isn't a theory presentation, so
Just a little bit.
I won't go too in depth on this, but reflecting on like the master's program at Ohio State, cognitive load theory, structural designers are most, I would assume, are probably familiar with this. So I won't rattle everything off, but a lot of it is, looking through your intrinsic load, seeing how the mental burden of information on screen. So when we make digital media and assemble things, we don't want to overload the viewer. We want to make sure, especially if we're giving instructions and guides, that we're giving it in nice segmented, clean chunks. So these are the different levels, and we really want to get to main load where it's, that's where we take all this complex information and we have a higher order level of thinking. And then of course, media learning principles, this is like Mayer's like seminal work, looking at, the combination of text and words, or I'm sorry, words and illustrations, and using that, whether it's images such as blueprints, instructions, video, using that in a way, again, that builds off of the cognitive load theories.
It does seem like people are digging the theory, which is new for me. Normally
Okay,
people get
all right.
bored whenever I start talking about it. So love to hear that. Um, So, along with that theory, we explained that kind of is our justification for what we do. So this is just kind of the basic, why should we use it? Outside of that, it achieves certain things. Well, this is a way for our students to learn from us and about us. Not only are they, there to get the information that they paid to get, but also they can learn about an industry professional at the same time. I always stress to our faculty members that your professional anecdotes are one of the greatest resources you have teaching. So they should get to know you a little bit as well as the subject matter expert, and you tie that, you know, the things you've done in your personal career that can be a learning opportunity into the course. Um, this kind of goes back to, that first theory, just seeing or hearing someone starts to engage. You don't have to make this great big magnum opus video. If it's just you at a beginning of a course introducing yourself, letting them know, you're human, um, just that kind of checks that box already. Um, and throughout the use of this, students usually will give feedback that they feel like they had a greater relationship with the faculty member the more of these components there are, and it makes them more willing to engage in the course content and more willing to ask for help during that point of struggle. It's like I said earlier, when a faculty member asks me, why aren't my students using their office hours? Well, if I told you to go to a stranger and ask them for help, I wouldn't be I don't think I'd be too excited about going and talking to this person I've never met before for help.
All right. So speaking of that, we're gonna do some reflection on the master's program. So one of the elements I honestly went back and looked at some of the class presentations I did, and the one that stood out to me was this piece on the cognitive load hyperlink research. And part of the reason I hold that one up is it's something that I think we've all done. I mean, you've had a URL, you hover your mouse over the URL, you see a bubble come up, it gives a description. Um, that sort of thing. Why are we focusing on this? Why is that important? Well, as we design media and other things, that, being intentional about those URLs and or those descriptions, this article really focuses on the hook, like getting those folks in. So as more technologies develop and things change, it's kind of like almost reflecting back on even those, I don't want to say simple technologies, but those maybe taken for granted technologies that we use every day, and seeing how something as simple as a chat bubble or a little bubble for a URL can provide information. Now, of course, if you have a wall of text and every other thing is hyperlinked, that's a different problem. But yeah, so let's dive into our check-in because I haven't been able to see the chat for a little bit. But do you think these practices that we've been describing, are they still relevant? Do they need to evolve? What's missing, or is everything hunky dory? We don't need to change a thing.
It looks like Laura Sheehy, sorry if I mispronounced that, had a question. How do you feel about instructional videos which are more formal, e.g. recorded in a lab slash polished?
Hmm.
So what I can say about that is that was kind of when we were still working together, me and Andy's bread and butter. We did a lot of on-site. Well, a lot of the on-site was before you joined the team, Andy, but I think students really loved when we could get into lab spaces and film kind of that more professional sterile environment, running the metallurgical processes or just trying to like explaining a process in the lab. And we did the whole, lab codes, all the protective gear. We showed that process from beginning to end, and students really liked that because for them, they felt like they were experiencing it themselves. So yeah, no, I do love content like that. I think it's really useful.
Yeah, and I know we've used when we collaborate with other units, we've kind of used almost a mixed approach, which can go either way because you can have like a solid intro video that's real slick, but then if the rest of the class doesn't match that, um, people can feel a certain way about that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it's so I'm in our studio right now, and we're able to do that sort of thing. But for a lot of our folks, they prefer doing it offsite, remote, because it's just that's the convenience factor, and that's where they can get their work done.
Yeah,
Um,
and sometimes it's also a population issue. Like our labs have capacity, and sometimes we just can't get a whole class in there. It looks like we have another engineering person in here because they said that I wish I could do those real life videos for my metallurgy and ceramics classes at
yeah,
Hopkins. So yeah, I've shot ceramics and I've shot metallurgy, so that's really cool to see there's other people. I always kind of thought we were really niche making videos in engineering, but it's cool to see other people experiencing those same things.
And thank you for pasting the hypertext environment article. That's helpful. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Moving on. Okay. So kind of what I was hitting at with some of the hyperlink stuff and the little blurbs that come up is kind of like alt text that not again, not a new technology, but I think it's getting more attention now. Obviously, most folks have seen the Department of Justice, their mandates for digital accessibility and that sort of stuff. So, when we're making these digital media assets and thinking about accessibility, Austin and I have found that when you are intentionally designing things by following the theories, making things reduce cognitive load, making trying to follow that format, you're going to you'll have an easier time meeting the accessibility mandates and needs. You're thinking of making things having captions and text and all that stuff. You're thinking about making it, this content, because a lot of these contents are going to be reusable in courses. Maybe they'll update some of the slides or other things, but at least in our practice, folks love, once they make that rock star lecture, they want to reuse it forever. So again, case by case basis, our medical folks definitely don't do that because that industry is changing left and right. So anyway, disability. And speaking of medical, we'll go right into Austin's part.
All right, so I recently moved from the College of Engineering to the College of Pharmacy, and I really wanted to talk about our just kind of an example where we found the use of visual media extremely helpful. The Ohio State College of Pharmacy offers a you know, further education course on opioid use disorder. It's a really rigorous course. It has about 5 weeks of module-based learning content that has different digital media elements within it. And all of those elements are from our pharmacy instructors and an individual from the Ohio Attorney General's office, John Sprague. Um, and they start with that. And then our final part of that course is you complete a digital escape room. And in this escape room, you'll get to see videos of a patient who has an opioid use disorder. Usually it starts with them being admitted to an emergency room due to overdose. You'll get to see videos of their interactions with their primary care physician who will explain their treatment plan for an opioid use disorder. And all of these, and you'll get to kind of be with that patient from the beginning of treatment to the end of treatment, including like just trying to imagine, okay, how are you going to get to your treatment center? What medications are we going to use? What do you look like, 6 weeks into your treatment? Did you stick with it? All of that is recorded. We have now this is like I said, you don't have to have like a magnum opus thing like this, but this is to me, if you're trying to go all in on this, this is a great example of how it works right. Because when we surveyed the students after the fact, they felt like they knew and could empathize with the patient. They felt like they could see and adhere to the doctor's practices really well. They had full knowledge of the patient's treatment plan, and it really reinforced just all those learning elements. This is a case study that is split into multiple episodes almost. Um, and it was viewed with this was all created through like a cross-disciplinary committee. It included dentists, it included practicing physicians, pharmacists, nurse practitioners. Um, and to me, it really was this a really great success. A lot of our students who took it just really felt like they got a good message out of it, and they felt like they felt confident in different treatment options of opioid use disorders and what that treatment plan looks like long term. So I've been really lucky to get to work on this. Um, and yeah, I just really think that this is kind of one of those things that I put up on a pedestal when people ask, well, does it work? This is, right what I point them to.
Austin, how many dare I say, years of development did that take?
So we make a new case every year we do a new case.
Okay.
It usually takes about 5 to 6 months of work to make the new case from start to finish, but a lot of that time is the back end of it, like figuring out how the case is going to work, who's the patient going to be, what demographic are they, what's going to be their treatment option. Like we do a lot of narrative and script planning,
Okay.
and for that we have to get a lot of people involved, including the people from the AG's office. So I wouldn't judge the time on this one to be, as typical of most of these
Right.
because we
Right.
wrangle people with crazy schedules. And then the filming usually takes about 2 months of just a bunch of little clips. We don't do big shoots. We shoot everything like, we'll punch out like a 45-second video and then that'll be what we shoot for the day. We try not to break our back with it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So kind of looking back, Austin, for some of the College of Engineering use cases. So one of the big ones was our kind of live stream event with chemical engineering, where that was an interesting take because that was something that we typically never really did before. But we had, faculty and the advancement group approach us and say, hey, we want to make a webinar, and we want to do B-roll, splice into live, splice into a light board session, all these things. So actually where I'm sitting right now is where we filmed it, but Austin went and did B-roll and we stitched it in, screen shared the video. Then we went back to our live studio where I am and went back and forth, all using Zoom too. So no fancy broadcast things. Kind of scary, but it worked out. And so those are kind of some things that we played around with, and we're really fortunate to have our faculty Blaze Gilmer researches on cancer development with chemical engineering, really into like using our light board and studio, and like what did that take, 3 months I think before we
It was,
did
it
that.
was about 3 months, I think. And then, yeah, then it was event. And
Yeah.
the great thing about that was that the whole process of that webinar was they were bringing a new faculty member in and they just wanted their community to get to know him. Now, to be fair, he was a very important faculty member that was doing like crazy cutting edge research. Um, but it introduced him into the community and gave everyone an opportunity to learn about him, through this webinar. And I think it was a really good success of introducing the community to someone through a video.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it took a lot of time and stuff, but it was, I agree, it was like a success. Um, then some of the more like, unique things we've done is not saying the webinar is not unique, but as we are in one, but the 360 videos have been fun. And that technology, I feel like it's kind of, it hits the hype cycle. Like everyone wants to do 360, and then it's like, ooh, maybe not. And then now it's kind of like getting back up there to, being a little more feasible as it's a more accessible technology, but not digitally accessible. So working through that, I think I saw someone earlier in the chat, like asking how things are to make things accessible. This example here is, we have to provide two examples. We do the 360 example, which can be viewed on like a computer or headset, or we do the images flat. It's not the same, I'll admit it, but that's what we do. We try to design things, with these new projects for those both, domains. The engineering process, this was a fun course, Austin. This was one of the first ones we collaborated on, the state
Yeah.
one, where we really, these were folks that were they were new to university, they were retired VPs, and they from a large car manufacturer, and they never taught before, but they were super excited about teaching. They just didn't know where to start. It was a fully online asynchronous class. So we, sat down with them, and, they wanted to do hour video, hour video, hour video. And you're like, okay, let's scale it back a little bit. Let's do the hour video, but let's chunk them out and, give you like 4 modules out of one of those hour videos. And, there's a little bit of hesitation there, but, part I think like what Austin and I's strength are is, kind of communicating, again, going back to that theory and showing them use cases from other faculty and things like that. Like, well, this is, where, if your audience is working professionals, this was a certificate-based course. If your audience is working professionals and are watch this probably after, their 9 to 5, they want to be able to do like kind of a quick dip, Monday through Friday. They're not going to want to cram an hour here and there. So that's kind of where we kind of met them at. Again, personal anecdotes. It's different for each person, but that was a really fun course. Is there anything you want to add about that one, Austin?
I think you hit most of it. But yeah, I mean, I really can't stress enough that if you've got a faculty member who has that professional experience, yeah, Frank Palick, his storytelling about Honda and their manufacturing process and lean process product development, he was teaching things in that you couldn't learn from any book. I mean, so much of it was him just storytelling. But storytelling in an educational environment with an educational cause. I mean, all of his stories linked back to his content on lean process product development. Um, and they were fantastic stuff too. He talked about different car designs, different builds he did, his struggles with the engineering process. So yeah, it was fantastic. I loved that series. Now it was kind of hell to produce. I'll be transparent here, but it was a really successful course in my opinion because of
Yes.
that anecdotal storytelling.
Yeah, and we used H5P for that as a story authoring tool to do knowledge checks. There was a lot of hyperlinks to other industry content, but also like ungraded multiple choice questions or written responses and things like that. And that was to to help break up the content and give a reflection point throughout, because again, these are working professionals. They want to be able to take this information and show their employer, hey, we got you this professional development grant or money to take these classes. What is your get? And so that's how we kind of help find that get. Lastly, this one is something that I think a lot of departments do, but it's important to call out anyway. Is being able to loan out equipment, because as I said earlier, folks want to be able to have that flexibility to kind of like record where they're at. So again, Frank wanted to record from the Honda plant, and he needed access to like a ring light, a good microphone, and other things. So, some of that stuff he could procure himself, but other things, it's like, here's our standard, here's our stuff. Go out and try it. Let us know. Send us a sample. We'll give you some feedback. There's a
And
classic. Go ahead.
that wasn't an expensive thing either. Like I think our light kits, they were like $30 a piece.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the microphone maybe a little more, but we've loaned those out multiple times and they're still holding up. So, you know, it is monetary investment, but just getting a few things you can hand out to a faculty member who wants to do it themselves and empowering them, I think helps a lot.
yeah. And like, yeah, you might have to do some more post production. But I think giving them that flexibility is also that piece of the relationship building that helps out a lot, so they can become a repeat customer and learn those best practices.
Well,
All right.
sorry, excuse me. Oh, this is good check-in time, and thank you, Austin and Andy. Just to let you know, there is one question being submitted to Q&A. So
All right.
this is great. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look here. Scenario-based learning seems to be the most engaging for a lot of students and subjects. I'm curious as to how it can be applied to different subjects. What do you find is a good balance between more complicated multi-step media elements versus simple elements to keep the cognitive load balanced? That is a good question.
I think it's really scenario based. I think it's really on a case by case basis of how complex is the problem. For instance, when we were working with the College of Welding at Ohio State Engineering, we had to take the arc welding course and we had to split arc welding into like 12 different videos because it's a really complex weld process. And we did that to keep that cognitive load lower. And we were only having them learn sections of it every so often, and it would build upon that. We've tried doing things like that, long format, like one big video about something really complex. It seems to be really harsh on the students, and they usually tune out. Um, I think for more simple processes, you can have longer videos as long as you gauge that competency level. Because we've done both, and we've kind of had varying success with both. So it's really up to, I think, the ID or the instructional designer in that situation to kind of make an assessment or judgment on what's the best split for this. Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the assessment practices. So what is the faculty's method of assessing, that knowledge transfer? And is it something where they need to take an exam? Is it something that's a defense? With engineers, obviously, it's a lot of exams because they want to be able to send them to industry showing that they know how to build this and, calculate that. So a lot of it comes down to having a knowledge check or a mastery of work problems. The recent one that comes to mind is, I believe it was civil, when they were doing a lot of different bridge construction classes and doing check-ins with the calculations. That could be a couple different ways where maybe it's not even a video. We're doing PDFs. And it was something where, okay, there's be a lecture video, but then there's a handout, and that's where they do the actual calculations. Could be ungraded assignments, then it could be the real deal. It's just, I think like Austin said, it is a case by case. It's challenging, right? That's our job, right? To figure out that happy medium while maintaining all the other things. So yeah, I, I'm going to reflect on that one for a little bit. I really would lean into the assessments for me and kind of see what rubrics we're having, to determine that mastery learning, and see how, if we have a very complex class, how we can balance that. Awesome. Okay. I see 33 unread chats, so I'm going to quickly scan. I want to keep accessibility. Math accessibility Hopkins. Oh, nice. Okay, let's check that Google link out afterward. Oops, I didn't mean to do it right now. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. And then I know I had this question on the screen for a little bit, and we kind of hit on it. How do you incorporate accessibility in your workflow? And I saw some folks saying starting with it is how you reduce the need for remediation and having to go back and fixing things. I'm seeing a lot more shops do that now, and that seems to be the right move. We are fortunate in College of Engineering. We actually have a full-time accessibility coordinator just for our department. That's really great. Remember, we have 20 different majors, so that's still, they have their work cut out for them. And we work with the central digital accessibility team. So there's a lot of, again, levels to that, but starting there prevents us from having to go back. Do we go back? Of course we do. We're always going back, but that it helps the front loading.
Yeah. And honestly, if you have questions about accessibility and, you're at a frustrating stop point, if your university has an ADA office, lean on them, ask questions, get answers you need. Don't feel like you're unable to, hound them, because accessibility is always going to come back on the designer. So it's good for you to be able to say that, I've done my due diligence. So take advantage of any resource your university offers.
Okay. See a couple more chats and then we'll move forward. Okay, they're talking about H5E if not. Awesome. Okay. All right. So now going to our good friend, Mr. Woods there. I just did a little GIF there, but that's him using a light board in the studio. That's one of our popular ones. Again, there's some setup to it. It always looks a lot easier than it actually is. So anyone who's done a light board knows that. And it really takes repeat tries. You're not gonna, in my opinion, it takes a couple shoots to really to get in that groove. So having that understanding and building that time in when you're working with folks who are very limited on time, it's really helpful. I put a QR code for our 360 meditation video if you all want to check that out. Let me know if there's any buffering issues. I know we have some on-prem servers that were, I don't know if it was the storm or rain or what was going on, but it was acting up a little bit. But that those are like kind of two of our fun examples. And then this next one, because I know we've been loving AI, and Austin hasn't seen this one yet, but it basically took some, templates of a popular game and kind of making personas out of them. And I used our Adobe Firefly AI and Copilot. So we're a Copilot in Adobe shop. Sorry, we're a Microsoft and Adobe shop. And we're permitted to use those AI tools because they're through our, vetted security and data things. So that's kind of where I'm from the emerging tech era. That's kind of where I'm seeing, I just kind of took a template of, a popular card game and put it through Firefly, but asked it to manipulate it. And that's where, that kind of generated for things like that. That'll be for a later workshop. I'm kind of still kind of sussing out a little bit, but you guys are getting a preview of some of these things and, making, these sort of assets. And then the other tool that Austin showed me, and I always brag about it, is the Adobe Podcast AI tool. So for example, like in your studio right now, say your HVAC, or you probably heard my laptop fans go off. This cleans that up real good. It's pretty snappy too for audio files. So if you're Adobe shop, highly recommend given this.
I don't even think you need to be an Adobe shop. I think it's
Really?
free.
Oh, well, never mind then. So yeah, maybe check that out if you have access to it. It really helpful. And then the other one, going to Copilot. This is still in its experimental phase, but we have Copilot Studio now where we can build kind of our own chat agents or chat bots. One of the ideas. So in a previous role, I did a lot of audio-visual classroom support. So trying to kind of make a, very simple, reducing cognitive load bot, if you will, to provide, feedback, to generate tickets, to get information to technician, to go back out to user, that sort of thing. It's AI, so it's still, let me put it this way. I'm very confident in keeping my job. So it's still, a little wonky, but this is the back end of it, so you have access to these tools or Copilot Studio. It might be something, to take a gander at. Another one I just made for this workshop, particularly, is just, I called it Brand Coach. So I loaded it with all of our OSU branding stuff and things like that to ask it, hey, help me write a branded email or branded letter and, make sure I use the right, not only fonts and colors, but, I'm incorporating the elements and things like that. Or HTML, that one's kind of nice. So we're a Canvas shop. So using a rich text editor or something so if you're transferring from a different LMS or wherever, this also is a way where you can kind of make it accessible to, or at least farm this tool out as a starting point if you have a lot of information. So this is something I might give to a student and say, hey, here's these tools to take information, and now we can kind of start somewhere. You still keep the human in the loop, your instructional designer self to verify all that sort of stuff. All right. I've talked a lot, so I'm going to stop.
Just as a kind of a parting thought for everyone, I do want to say, if you're trying to pivot more into the digital media realm, don't start by thinking you need the most expensive camera, the most expensive mic, the most expensive whatever. I started as a higher ed digital media designer with a phone and a lavalier mic, and I didn't know how to edit, and I didn't know how Adobe works. And I made content with it. It wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. So start where you're comfortable, do what you can, and then as the need arises, maybe you liked it, maybe you see a bigger use for it in your department. Maybe then start thinking about the monetary investment of it, but don't think you need these great expensive tools to get it done. Um, this is really something that you can start homegrown. So, but yeah, let's get into Q&A, and if you have any questions, let us know.